Around the glowing Thanksgiving table, the sweet cinnamon aroma of apple pie mingles with the hum of laughter and chatter, filling the room with warmth and love. Candles flicker against the window panes, casting golden light across faces gathered close and colorful plates of food. Outside, dusk settles early, the kind of November evening when the glow indoors draws you home like the soft, warm burrows of wintering animals. Thanksgiving is a time to reflect on how we give and receive, how appreciation expands gratitude into something active and alive. Although offering words of gratitude is a gift to the other, since serving others feels good, gratitude focuses on honoring and warming the person who has been served. Appreciation and messages of appreciation for the specialness of the other carries that energy outward, strengthening our connection to each other and to the earth that sustains us. This week, we're exploring appreciation through the shared garden of the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, whose relationship has nourished people and land for centuries. And we'll talk with regenerative design expert Rob Avis about what it means to move from extraction to partnership with the natural world, and how appreciation can be a force for resilience in both our lives and our landscapes. I'm Jessica Morgenthal, and this is Resilience Gone Wild, where we explore how nature's quiet brilliance can help us care more deeply for ourselves, for each other, and for the wild world we all share. Today, we're heading into the garden to learn what the three sisters' enduring partnership reveals about appreciation, abundance, and the kind of connection that keeps life thriving. We are seated together at Thanksgiving dinner with family and friends. The smell of roasted squash and sweet corn pudding drifts from the kitchen. Laughter rises and falls. The soft rhythm of plates, voices, and stories are shared around a full table. Candles flicker low, catching the glint of the remaining cranberry sauce and the golden butter melting on a few half-torn rolls. On the sideboard, a homemade spiced pumpkin pie waits patiently beneath its sugared crust. As the meal winds down, conversation softens into that peaceful, contented hum that follows a good feast. Nana pours another cup of cider. Uncles tease about who will get the biggest slice of pie. Then, as talk turns to appreciation for one another and for where the food came from, the eldest granddaughter leans forward. "Who do we thank for all this?" she asks. Grandpa smiles, folding his napkin and glancing toward the window. "That's a fine question," he says. "There's many we haven't thanked yet." "Who?" the youngest asks, eyes wide. "The ones who made the feast possible," he says, standing up. "Come on, let's take a quick walk before dessert and thank some of the real hosts of Thanksgiving." The girls jump up from the table, giggling, tugging on their boots, and snuggling into their jackets. The promise of pie waiting when they return adds a sparkle of excitement to the adventure. They step into the low sun. Behind them, the sound of laughter and the faint clink of dishes fade into the still air. The family's garden stretches behind the house, rose stubbled and golden. The air is crisp and clean, carrying the scent of earth and fallen leaves. Maize or corn stalks rattle softly in the breeze, and a few crows drift over the field, calling to one another as if reminding the world that it's not yet winter. The girls run ahead, their boots crunching the thin frost clinging to the ground. At the edge of the garden, Grandpa pauses. "You know," he begins, "the delicious food we just ate tells a story that's older than Thanksgiving itself. Those dishes, the roasted squash, the green beans, the succotash, even the pumpkin pie, all come from the same family. They're called the Three Sisters: corn, beans, and squash." He kneels beside a row where dry stalks still stand. Long before that first gathering we learn about in school, Indigenous communities figured out something special. They learned to listen to one another and to the land. They planted these sisters together because each one gave something the other needed. A perfect little ecosystem, right here in the soil. The middle granddaughter bounces on her heels. "We learned about that," she says. "The beans feed the dirt." Grandpa's eyes light up. "That's right, the beans take nitrogen from the air, something plants can't eat, and turn it into food for the soil. It's like they cook dinner underground for everyone else." The eldest kneels beside him, brushing her hand against a tall, brittle stalk. And the corn holds them up, right? Exactly, he nods. The tall corn offers her strength first, her sturdy stalks becoming ladders for the beans to climb toward the sun. And the squash makes shade, the youngest blurts out, grinning. Grandpa chuckles. She sure does. Her wide leaves keep the soil cool and moist, and her prickly stems keep nibblers like rabbits, mice, and beetles from taking more than their share. Together, they take care of one another, giving, protecting, and restoring what's been used. And below them, he adds, a whole community of earthworms and microbes join in, breaking down old roots into new life. Even underground, everything is connected. He leans back on his heels, glancing across the field. That way of growing, of listening to the land, is what people today call regenerative farming. Back then, it was just called respect. Nothing wasted, nothing taken more than needed. The soil stayed alive because it was treated like a partner, not a resource to use up. They knew diversity kept the land strong. Different roots, shapes, and rhythms meant fewer pests, richer soil, and crops that could weather whatever the season brought. Each season closed the loop. What fed the people returned to feed the earth, a rhythm of giving and rest that kept the land thriving for generations. The eldest granddaughter nods slowly. So they help each other, like we do when we cook together. Grandpa smiles. Exactly. That's appreciation in action. Thanksgiving has always been about giving thanks for what we've been given, the harvest, the meal, the love that surrounds us. And appreciation takes it one step further. It's seeing and honoring the awesomeness in others, in the people we love, in the land that feeds us, in the small miracles that make life possible. Gratitude fills your heart. Appreciation lets it overflow. He looks up at the girls, smiling. The three sisters show us how to do both, to give thanks and to give back. Together they make a living circle of care and generosity, each one stronger because of the others. That's what makes them sisters. The eldest looks back toward the house. People think Thanksgiving is about what we're given, she says softly. Maybe it's really about how we give back. Grandpa answers, like the three sisters. Their boots crunch softly as they turn back toward the house, carrying traces of soil that cling like memory. Behind them, the garden settles into stillness again, alive with quiet work and humility, resting, caring, and waiting for the next season to begin. That quiet moment, standing between the warmth of the house and the wisdom of the field, holds the heart of what the three sisters teach, that life flourishes through appreciation, generosity, and the steady rhythm of giving and receiving. What the three sisters model for one another is what Thanksgiving invites in us all, to grow stronger through shared care, generosity, and appreciation. Thanksgiving is about gathering together, a reminder that family, friends, and community are essential to a joyful and healthy life. It's also a time to give thanks for abundance, for the nourishment that comes from nature, and for the people who make our lives richer. At its best, Thanksgiving celebrates the simple gifts: real food from real soil, homestyle cooking that reconnects us to the warmth of preparing and savoring a meal made with love, and the deep sense of joy that comes from being together. The word Thanksgiving carries its own quiet wisdom. It's about the giving of thanks. It honors what happens when people bring time, care, love, and effort to the table. Every dish, every story, every small act of hospitality carries something of the person who offered it, and together they create abundance, a moment to step away from scarcity and remember how much we already have. Over time, the holiday has grown heavier for many. The effort, cost, and complexity of celebrating can blur its essence. Abundance can overflow, conversations can divide, and the rush of preparation can leave us more depleted than delighted. Appreciation restores that balance. It's the mindset that brings warmth and meaning back to our gatherings, the bridge between receiving and giving, between feeling grateful and expressing love. It expands gratitude from a quiet feeling to a living flow of energy that moves outward, nourishing others as it moves through us. Gratitude remains vital. It softens us, grounds us and opens the heart to calm and safety. Appreciation builds on that foundation and carries gratitude forward. It shifts the focus from what we've received to who made it possible and how their presence adds value and meaning to the world around us. That's what appreciation does best. It turns gratitude into something active and alive, an act of love that strengthens connection. It's the current that keeps generosity, humility, and hope moving through families, teams, and communities. We can see it in the three sisters, maize, beans, and squash, who thrive through appreciation. Each gives what she can and values what the others bring. Their sisterhood shows that resilience grows through shared care and trust. They are a living reminder that human and natural systems flourish when energy flows freely among their parts. The resilience lesson here is simple and powerful. Gratitude restores our balance. Appreciation restores the balance of the whole. When appreciation moves through us, energy circulates, relationships strengthen, and life itself grows more resilient. And that brings us to today's conversation with Rob Avis, a leading voice in the land regeneration movement. Together, we'll explore how appreciation, paired with humility and love, can shift the way we live, build, and power the world around us. Welcome, Rob Avis. I am so thrilled to have you here with us, having this conversation about changing your mindset, regenerative farming, your shift from extraction to regenerative thinking, like just an incredible career and pathway of life that I can't wait to learn more about and to share with our listeners and weave that into the two aspects of today's episode, which are a focus on the three sisters and Thanksgiving and how we live in systems that we need to appreciate what others bring, the uniqueness that others bring, not just be grateful for what they do for us. Enlightened self-interest is something we're going to talk about that Rob has been sharing with me and totally lights me up. And we're talking about the shift from gratitude to appreciation. So yay, welcome. Tell us about yourself and what lights you up about the path that you've taken that might integrate with this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Again, name's Rob Avis. Yeah, I started off my career, I guess actually pre-career in a cake factory. I'm Charlie in the chocolate factory. Wow. I don't eat a lot of cake anymore. We generated 100,000 cakes a day. So we were producing for Walmart and Kroger and all the big companies. And so I come from industrial food and ended up in a mechanical engineering program here in Alberta. Followed my wife to Calgary, where I ended up in the oil and gas industry as the guy bringing natural gas and petroleum to refineries so that you could drive your car. And I was also the guy cutting down thousands of acres of forest in order to do that. And it really crushed me because I think like part of me, I witnessed a video when I was 7 years old at the Vancouver Zoo of the Amazon getting ripped down, and I wrote the Prime Minister at the time and asked him to stop it. So I think for
7, you stopped and wrote that letter?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was just devastated. And so I think growing up, I had kind of environmentalist roots. And then I ended up being the person tearing that forest down. And serendipity struck one day as I was getting ready to cut down a massive swath of forest. I got a video in my inbox from a friend, Jeff Lawton, who I actually just spoke to last night. He's a mentor of mine. He's put out a video about repairing this meaningless piece of land in the Dead Sea Valley in Jordan. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to be part of the new paradigm. I don't want to kind of keep the existing paradigm going. And one of the reasons I was so conflicted is because I drove to work, I heated my house. How can I criticize an industry that I'm supporting as a consumer? And, I didn't find a lot of solutions. People just in Calgary just kind of said, well, this is how it's done. It's going to be done this way forever. And just sit down and get your work done sort of thing. And that
this
video
was about 20 years ago, right? This was around 2007, 2008.
Yeah. And so we quit our jobs, my wife and I. She was also a petroleum engineer. And we traveled to Denmark. We lived at a renewable energy institute for 6 months. And we're pretty convinced that we could repower the world, given that we were energy engineers. And then we converted a Volkswagen van to run on vegetable oil. We drove through most of the states, Canada, Mexico, and just like trying to figure out how we'd feed the world. Because
wait, I have to just just picture this. So your van worked on vegetable oil. How did you fill the gas tank?
Well, my wife doesn't like to admit this too much, but she would go to a cafe somewhere else because she didn't want anything to do with this. I would put on these giant gloves, and I'd go to the back of the restaurant. I devised this pumping mechanism that sat on the back of our van, and it was one of those hippie vans. And we would stick the dipstick into the rotten grease. It was horrible. It was the worst smell you can imagine. And then we would pump it into our tank. And the conversion to run a diesel on vegetable oil is actually very, very simple. And so depending upon what had been fried in the oil was what our van smelled like.
Oh my God. So like it could smell like fish one day or French fries the next day. That is a crazy thing to think about.
Spring rolls, anyways, there's lots of jokes that could be made about that. And so we did that for 6 months. And then we came back. I ended up moving to Australia for another 6 months. My wife stayed behind just to learn permaculture.
Yeah.
And traveled for 3 years. Like we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars basically in opportunity and hard costs, just retraining ourselves. And then we started Verge Permaculture once we got back. And we've taught about 10,000 people around the world in permaculture and permaculture-related subjects. And most recently started Fifth World just at the beginning of COVID. And here we are.
Wow. What an incredible journey. And you're still together.
Yeah, marriage is stronger than ever. Definitely not sustainable. It's very regenerative.
What a sense of purpose you took to living. Like each step along the way, I heard you talk about a sense of purpose. You felt that you were doing something, and I'm not questioning it, but doing something good by helping people to be able to live their lives through access to energy. And then this big shift to like, this isn't the way we should be treating our world and living our lives. So amazing. Wow. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'd love to see pictures. I hope that we can share some pictures of the vegetable van, oil van on our show notes. So keep an eye out for that, everyone. Okay, so tell us about Fifth World, because there's a reason that you named it that. And
well, we're supposed to be talking about Three Sisters, and the reason I bring that up is because Fifth World actually comes from a Hopi prophecy, so similar roots to the Three Sisters, actually. And so the idea is that we live in the Fourth World right now from a temporal perspective, and we believe that a better way of living is possible. And this was described in Hopi prophecy that the Fifth World would emerge, and it would be an age of enlightenment. And for us, the enlightenment is, and we can dig into this, there's a lot behind all of this, but that we don't need to have an adversarial relationship with ecology. And in fact, it's in our best interest to sort out what a win-win, to use your words, a win-win can look like, and we have to kind of unwrap all of that stuff. But that's kind of the essence of Fifth World, is that we can coexist on this planet in a very healthy and productive way.
Well, is there a specific story, the Hopi story, that you can share that is based on? I don't know if it's simple to explain.
I mean, it's very closely tied to it's like Hopi and Mayan. And so it's actually very closely tied to the 2020 Mayan calendar. And so a lot of these indigenous groups actually had very similar stories about this transition time that we would be in. And so if you want to dig into that, it's like baked in. You can go down the Mayan path, you can go down the Hopi path, but they're very, very close.
Yeah. And as you said, this all ties to the Three Sisters, because this is the heritage, like to deeply connect with the land and to be curious and to be respectful and to be appreciative of what is being offered by each individual part of the system and how they support each other, and that it's about the system, not just about what I can get out of it. And we do need to go down the enlightened, what did you call it? Enlightened self-interest. Enlightened self-interest, yes, as well. So where does that take you on the Three Sisters, since you're keeping that thread going better than I am?
Yeah, I think before we go there, I think if we dig into enlightened self-interest a little bit more, and then kind of tie that into the Three Sisters, I think that there'll be a nice crossover there. Awesome. So there's three kind of paradigms that we've identified that I think is really important for the human story as it pertains to today and where we go. I'm a canoeer, and when I'm going down a river, it's really important to be aware of the hazards in the river, so where the rocks are, so that you don't destroy your canoe and end up potentially getting injured or dying even, just like your story actually with the kayaks. But if you focus too much on the hazards, basically your canoe will go to where you're looking, essentially. And so there's a difference between being aware and then focusing on the path versus just putting all of your attention on the hazard itself.
Wow, that is so important, Rob. Let me just stop for a moment and really bring that, to really highlight that. I mean, that you have a choice in life to focus on the scarcity and the risk and the uncertainty and the fear, which is so much of the way we're living in, at least in the Western world today. And the simple metaphor, the brilliant simple metaphor that you just offered, you're in a canoe and you have a choice. You can focus on the path or you can focus on the hazards is so incredibly important. And I really appreciate it. And I'm using the word appreciation with great sincerity. Thank you for offering that metaphor to offer a new story for people to keep in their head, that picture the canoe and the path you're taking, not the rock that's over there that you're avoiding.
Yeah. And another way to think about that is there's a sphere of influence and a sphere of concern. And if we think about social media, we get bombarded with the sphere of concern constantly. And there's huge scale problems like ocean dead zones and climate change and peak oil. And it's, as an individual, actually, really interesting thing about social media I just read yesterday. I've been really getting strict about my phone use because it has such a huge influence. And you can't recognize the influence it's having until you create a vacuum. But fear, so we pick up our phone now to deal with cortisol. It's actually not a dopamine thing. It's like when we actually get stress release from looking at our phone. And we don't think about phones as like cocaine or other hard drugs, but it actually is when we think about hard drugs, we know physiologically they change the structure of our brain. Well, it turns out that our phones actually enhance the size of our amygdala. And so as that amygdala grows,
fight or flight location of our brains. It's our ancient.
It's the fear center. And so our phones are actually making physiological shifts to where the glucose or the ketones are going in our brain. And it's growing it because it's we're constantly bombarded with that sphere of concern. And because of that, and because of the way social media is designed, it takes us out of operating in that sphere of influence. And there's lots of reasons for that. One, it's a smaller, it seems like growing a tomato plant in my backyard is going to have a no lick of difference with regards to climate change. And you're right, that one tomato won't. But if 1 million people grow tomatoes, that will have a difference. And there's no difference between tyranny and tyranny. And we need to basically scale millions or billions of little micro experiments and empower people to understand that the aggregate of all of our life decisions actually directs where the canoe goes. And so the reason I brought the canoe analogy up is that the words that we use and the stories that we tell have a huge influence on our belief patterns and how we actually spend our time. And this was my insight when I left our job is we all have about 600,000 hours on this planet if we're lucky. And the only thing we really actually control is where we direct those hours. And so there's 3 main paradigms. And I think that these paradigms are important so that people can make decisions about how those hours are spent. So the first paradigm is one we're all aware of. It's the kind of capitalist revolution, the industrial revolution. It's focusing on GDP growth, focusing on shareholder value. While capitalism is the best system that we've invented yet, it does create a lot of negative externalities. And it can be summarized up into how do I get more stuff? How do I grow beyond, there's no upper limit to growth. We just kind of keep doing what we're doing. But we know that that's coming to an end because we're running out of planet. And the solution to this is let's go to Mars. Let's explore exploiting, asteroids and all of these things. The second paradigm kind of emerged in the 90s and really kind of captivated me. And it's the sustainability paradigm. And it's filled with language that's really important to dig into. So net neutral, reduce your footprint, xeriscaping, where you take a front lawn and you just cover it with landscape fabric and rocks, or you put a plastic lawn there. And if you kind of dig into that a little,
resources, you're not overusing resources, right? Isn't that
or
Because
you're
you can't.
minimizing resource use, or you're minimizing your footprint. And so if you kind of dig into the meaning behind all of that, it's kind of negative. It's like humans are inherently destructive. We have to do our best to minimize our destruction. And the logical endpoint to the sustainability paradigm is actually the elimination of humans. Like if you kind of, I know it sounds a bit hyperbolic, but bear with me a little bit. And so, and then
just to that point, I mean, that's sort of the talk of the world that we live in, that we are the ones who aren't going to be here. The planet will survive. We might have led to great extinctions, but there will be an Earth and a planet, and it will, just as when you find an empty plot of land that you called meaningless before in Jordan, like if you let it go, it will recover in some form or fashion with its sense of biodiversity and a positive sense of energy and health. We won't be here though, right?
Yeah, totally. And that's where the enlightened self-interest comes from. And so if we dig into that word footprint and we take a bit of a side story here for a second, I live on 160 acres. I have 2 creeks here. We bought this just before COVID. The owner before us was killing all the beavers. We've since let them come back. We have about 8 families of beavers that are thriving on our property right now.
So beautiful. Wow. Okay. Keep going.
And to the untrained eye, when I give tours, they'll say, wow, these beavers are making a mess. Like they're cutting all these trees down. They're leaving like chopsticks. It looks like all these trees are chopsticks everywhere. And then there's a giant, dam and their little lodge. I think it's really important.
Rob, that I'm coming to visit. I have to see this. Like,
come visit. Totally. And so what's actually happening behind the scenes is super important for humans to understand. And so there's this saying in permaculture that everything gardens. Every species on Earth manipulates their environment to create habitat for themselves. The difference between a beaver and a human, though, is that the beaver has some constraints, that it doesn't have opposing thumbs and it doesn't, send rockets to space. It's constrained by its environment a little bit. And so we can kind of classify the footprint that the beaver has as a disturbance pattern. And disturbance kind of has a negative connotation, but if we take the sentiment out of it, it creates disturbance by cutting trees down, by putting in dams, and it increases the background biodiversity by 28 times. So its act of living, its act of gardening, its act of manipulating its ecosystem, its footprint is actually enhancing the ecosystem around it.
Yeah.
Yes, it creates.
It reminds me of an episode I did about giant tortoises. And, you think about these giant tortoises that are forging paths and just get rid of everything that's in its way. And it's creating an incredibly biodiverse world by dropping seeds and making room for making room in this path for other creatures to follow. And there's just, we need to rethink what disturbance is, as you said, right? Like, and look for where the incredible positive silver linings are to any disturbance that non-humans cause.
Yeah, totally. And so if we go back into biology for a second and look at like what every creature has innate characteristics. So if you look at a wild robin, for example, like a bird, and like it's programmed to fly. It's programmed, it might fumble a little bit as it's getting started, but give it a little bit of time and it gets into the air. And so that, like watching robins, watching beavers and their innate capabilities, it made me wonder, like what is innate to being human? And if we want to think about that, like, I have 2 little kids, or they're not as little anymore, but what is the thing that you never have to tell a child to do once it can walk? Like, what does it innately do?
Walk.
After it walks. It creates chaos. It creates chaos. Everywhere it goes, it just destroys everything. And it's just like, that's how it's like sense making. It's putting dirt into its mouth. Like when we were living in the city, we had to create a chaos corner for our kids because they kept destroying our garden. And so it's like, what does that mean? So if a bird's meant to fly and it distributes seeds and it does all these, like it creates trophic cascades through its life. Same with a beaver, same with a whale, same with a tortoise.
Same with a human.
What does it mean to be human? And it's like, well, we are actually entropy machines. We create chaos. But the problem is that we've only just launched satellites into space in the last 100 years. And if we look back on the human story, we've basically copied the same farming mechanism for the last 10,000 years. And by doing that, we've cut down half of Earth's forests. And we followed the same pattern of deforest, plow, and desertify. And so we now have enough feedback to know what we've done. in a fast enough, we have enough feedback quick enough that we can actually course correct. And it's fairly recent that we've had this. Like we're kind of waking up to what we've done and to what our history is. And we need to pay very close attention to this. So the third paradigm is the regenerative paradigm. And so in the same way that the beaver can create disturbance in footprints and enhance its ecosystem, the difference between disturbance, whether it's positive or negative, is based on scale, time, placement, and form. If you get the scale wrong, you end up with a feedlot or oil sands. If you get the timing wrong, you can cause huge amounts of destruction because it's not supposed to be there at that time. If you get the placement wrong, we shouldn't be raising cows in the Amazon. There's lots of problems with that, but that doesn't make cows bad. It just means that they shouldn't be there. And form, it's like, what is planting bananas in Alberta probably doesn't make sense. It's the wrong thing. And so we can kind of classify all these systems in terms of those 4 categories. And if we get the design right, then the thing I always think about is if the most negative thing on Earth is a nuclear bomb, what's the most positive? And how much power we actually have to actually be a force of good. And why would we want to do that? Because I actually think about the children that my children are going to have, and their children are going to, like 7 generations down the road. It's selfish for me to not make decisions today that will be beneficial to not just my kids either, all kids. It doesn't need to be my offspring. It's I want kids to flourish.
Yeah, it's a win-win-win. It's not about gratitude, which is just for me. It's about appreciation to understanding how the whole system works, and we get to this positive self-enlightenment. And it's just the system we've gone through these 3 paradigms, and we're back to where we were when humans weren't only thinking about themselves, right? When they were working in systems and thinking about 7 generations out and thinking about being absolutely deeply connected to everything else around them, not owning it, not dominating, not extracting. Beautiful. So I'm thinking of resilience, right? Because my world is about resilience, and the connection between chaos and resilience is the ability to handle the chaos. Right. So we've gone from sustainability, which is really about sort of taking better care of what we're using, what we're extracting, and trying to do less damage. As you said, it's the negative view to the regeneration, regenerative thinking. And I'm thinking of resilience, if we can just think about it in that concept of what do we have to do to make us and everything else stronger so that we could handle the chaos, so that the beaver doesn't seem to be destroying. It's doing good. It's just, you have to be curious and see and understand what is happening in this system and how to handle the hard stuff. So build yourself up so the water doesn't affect you in the middle of the process of them building a new pathway, right? And so go with that. Yeah.
So I like to actually put a bit more granularity into that word. And so one way to think about this, and I'll bring it back to a personal anecdote that everybody can think about in their own world, but so I like to think about fragility. And so we know that if I was to ship you a wine glass, I'd send you, put it in a box, and I'd put a label on it that says fragile, handle with care. Resilience to me, and this was actually not to me, this is Nassim Nicholas Taleb wrote a book called Anti-Fragile. So he would say resilience is like the concrete sidewalk, and you can chip that sidewalk with a sledgehammer or something, and it still acts as a sidewalk. And then the concept of anti-fragile is the opposite of fragile. And so if you were putting a label onto something that I was going to ship to you that was anti-fragile, it would say anti-fragile, apply volatility. And so that's still very esoteric. What does that actually mean? Well, if I use my body as an example and I sit on the couch for the rest of my life I am an anti-fragile entity, I will atrophy, my body will get sick, and I will die eventually because of inactivity and all sorts of other metabolic syndrome and things like that. And so not only do anti-fragile entities don't just benefit from volatility, they need it. And we can actually classify this a little bit more broadly. Life forms in general are anti-fragile. And so when I lift weights, my muscles get bigger, I get stronger. When I do movement, lots of complex movements, I become more agile. But if you get the dosage wrong, then you can tear your muscles, you can tear your tendons, you can actually do harm. And so the beaver is manipulating all of its life forms around it. And the response of that disturbance, which is like lifting weights for an ecosystem, makes the ecosystem stronger. And so much of what we do in modern day society with monocrops, with the way that we pave over cities, the way that we genetically engineer organisms, they're attempts at trying to monetize kind of anti-fragile entities. And by doing that, we actually create fragile systems,
Mhm.
ironically. And so we can design human habitat around the premise of these like anti-fragile. Resilience is the word typically used in ecology. The words kind of are synonymous, but what Nassim was saying is like we actually need a bit more granularity between the three concepts. And I think this is a beautiful segue into the concept of three sisters, which is a much more complex way of growing annual crops than just growing the squash, the corn, and the beans together, which is typically what a three sisters garden is. And so are you familiar with the term quorum sensing?
No, tell me.
So this is a recent discovery in soil science. And I'll come back to three sisters here in a sec, but they've discovered that, so the concept of like the quorum, if you've been in a not-for-profit or some sort of a board, typically you have to reach a quorum. So quorum sensing occurs when there's more than about 9 species of plants growing in symbiosis.
Which is so interesting because a quorum is typically 10 and it's been created through, centuries or millennium of writings that came from people who were originally more closely connected to nature, right into the earth. That is super interesting because 10 is more than 9. Okay, go ahead.
So what they've observed that when more than about 9 species are coexisting within a close vicinity, and these are typically annual, but it would probably happen in perennial systems as well, almost guaranteed it happens in perennial systems, that there's a 1 + 1 = 3 sort of scenario going on there. So more carbon is created, more mycelium is created, more water harvesting is created.
More movement,
Everything. And so farmers in the regenerative space are using this to their advantage, and they're actually building some things called cocktail cover crops where they're putting in, some of them are going really extreme because so this step change happens around 9 and then it happens again around 19 to 20. And so they're building these like really complex cover crops that they're using kind of industrial monoculture equipment to plant out these highly complex ecologies. And it's kind of a little bit ironic that we're kind of finally going back to that, after all these years. And then they're finding new ways of using these complex plant assemblies, either by grazing them or with the seed sorting technology that exists now. You can actually harvest multiple types of seeds at the same time and then sort them after the fact, or sell them as a cocktail of seeds for pig food or whatever. And so when we think about three sisters, this is what the indigenous people understood. There wasn't necessarily the same level of quorum sensing going on because we had less plants there. Although I would argue that in a milpa, which is where this was originally developed, is a Mayan technology. Milpa stands for a 2 to 3 acre parcel of land, which is about what an individual could cut down with a machete. We actually studied in the Maya when we were doing our Volkswagen vegetable run. So 2 to 3 acres is about what an individual could cut down, burn, and then they would farm the three sisters for about 5 years. And then they would exhaust the soils and they'd move on to the next place. That 2 to 3 acres had the right surface area to volume ratio so that it could regenerate within a 20-year cycle. And as long as they had the rotation proper, I guess you could argue they were benefiting from quorum sensing because the jungle would actually be regenerating because of its diversity as well. And what's really interesting is when they've studied, this has been a while since I've looked at this, but when they studied the three sisters and how efficient it was at solar utilization, it uses something like 83 or 84% of the sunlight that hits the planet. And so for those folks who don't know what three sisters is,
it uses it efficiently because you've got the large squash leaves that are covering the ground. So it's not just heating up the earth. It's being used. Yeah. So go ahead, keep going.
Well, it does it in a whole bunch of different ways. So one is it's spatially efficient. And so you've got squash kind of covering the land. You've got the beans that are vertically climbing up the corn stalk. But then there's other things happening here too. You've got C3 and C4 plants in the mix. And so corn is C4, which means that for every unit of photosynthesis that it's activating, I guess, or like photosynthesis that's going on, it's storing 4 carbon units per action. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know what the right words are.
That's good enough. We got this. Okay, good.
And then the beans are going to be like C3. And so they're storing a different type of carbon. And so they're photosynthesizing in a different way. And then you've got this like huge squash plant. I don't know if squash is C3 or C4. I'd have to think about that or look it up. And then you compare that to a wheat field. It uses, less than 20% of the sun that's hitting it. And so one of the things that I've thought about for a while is like, is climate change a CO2 thing, or have we just completely changed the albedo of our planet because we cut down half of the trees? And we know, if you put a Chihuahua into the desert, it's going to die pretty quickly because it has no hair on its back. A German Shepherd will eventually die as well, but it's not going to die of the same things because it's got a protective layer on it. And so we've fundamentally taken the transducer of energy, which is forests, and we've eliminated over the last half of our forests over the last 10,000 years. That changes how rain forms. That changes the moisture in the atmosphere. Trees also seed clouds. We know that they make rain. And so I like the analogy of the three sisters, but we can actually take it even farther. We can make a 4-6 sister or 5 sister. In our garden, we have a huge amount of diversity in a really small space because we're trying to take advantage of quorum sensing. We know that like this year, we had a horrible beet crop, for example, but we had a really great squash crop. And so having diversity means that you can kind of go with the flow. And even though the beets didn't do really well for us, they were great for the chickens. And so there's another layer of diversity that we're bringing into that.
We haven't even talked about the addition to the animals and the mycelium. And the fungi that's part of this whole system as well, right? Totally. So in terms of the quorum, it's all of these pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is if you read Indigenous, and I'm sure you've read this, but the Indigenous people didn't see the jaguar as separate from the forest.
Yeah.
It was part of the system. It was the forest. It was actually a jaguar in the Amazon is an expression of, I think it's 400,000 acres of intact rainforest. So when you see one jaguar pair, they rely upon like a 400,000 acre range and so they're kind of a proxy for an intact ecosystem. So
amazing. So we're talking, let's get back to, because all you've offered us is so incredibly thought-provoking and important, and thinking about in system structure and ancient ways of thinking that go back to the way we need to be thinking and connected and understanding how we all fit together. So where we go with appreciation, to me, all that just keeps bubbling to the top is this is about how we contribute and participate in a long-term system, as opposed to short-term gratitude and short-term extraction and short-term taking. And you talked about the fields that lay fallow, the 7 years on, who knows exactly, it depends on the crops, who knows exactly what the right system is, but the respect for other, the appreciation for what other is going through, what their microscopic experience is that matters, as opposed to just the obvious that's in front of us. And where does that take you? What comes up for you around that?
The word that comes to my mind, and I think it's linked, but humility. I'm so lucky to have 100 acres of intact old growth forest on my property. And it's almost like I'm watching, it's like truly emotional, right? To think about the experience that you're having in life, to be part of the ancient old growth forest, and to imagine those every aspect of that system has been there for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and to be part of that, as opposed to be dominating it and just using it, just to feel that deep connection to and appreciate all the pieces that are around you that fit together and make this world work long-term and not collapse, as part of what your language. Yeah. I have this graphic I can send to you for your show notes, and It's in my book that I've written. And if we think about those 3 paradigms, the conventional paradigm, how do I get more stuff? And we think about a pyramid with all of life underneath it. It's me sitting on top of the pyramid and having dominion over all of the resources in life on Earth. And then the sustainability paradigm is inverse of that. And so it's like I'm less than nature, and somehow I'm on the bottom of the pyramid and life's standing on top of me. And because I'm such a horrible entity, I'm less than nature. And then the last graphic is I'm a neighbor. I'm part of a community of life, and I appreciate my neighbors. And so much, coming back to the words, I had this insight recently, and I wrote a LinkedIn post about this. Have you ever looked up the names of the herbicides that we use as a species?
I've seen some of them, yeah. I don't know it well, though. It's not my world. So go for it. Tell us what you were going to say.
They're all war terms.
Yeah, one of my mantras in life at this current time of purpose is to shift people from violent and war-based metaphor to positive nature-based metaphor. And I literally go through this process both in my writings and in my head that, because we've done it for so long that words like shoot or whatever, like I like actively hear myself and watch the way I express myself and shift. And I'm working really hard to get that part of it. So I'm so excited that you just brought that up. So go ahead with the violent. Yeah.
Just look it up and afterwards. And
it's about killing.
Yeah, it's actually a very appropriate use, and a lot of these companies actually were originally contributing to the war machine. And coming back to the concept of humility, when I see, we get the county coming by every once in a while, and they give us shit for having invasive weeds on our property, and it's
really?
Like, who am I to decide why those plants are there and what they're doing, and that I somehow have a grand plan of what should and shouldn't be growing on this property. If you understand ecology, and this is such an interesting thing about the biological world, like evolutionary biologists can't agree with conservation ecologists. So conservation ecologists believe that as soon as the first botanists showed up in North America, that's what this ecosystem has always been and always will be. And evolutionary biologists believe that ecology is constantly evolving and moving into some other thing that's based upon, and it comes back to like epigenomics and stuff, like it's sensing basically what's going on in the environment and it's adapting. It'd be interesting to actually interview conservation ecologists and evolutionary ecologists and ask them if they believe in climate change. Because if you do, you believe that the climate is changing, does it not make sense that the ecosystems that are dealing with that change would also have to evolve? And the plant mix, which we know, for example, the beech forests of Europe have moved thousands of kilometers north and south again in pulses relative to the climate shifts that Europe has seen over the last 10,000 years. And so, we do have plants on our property that threaten, at the end of the day, like invasive weeds are a threat to industrial agriculture. That's really where that
the
comes
issue,
from.
Right? Like, they're invasive for capitalism. They're not invasive for regenerative.
Yeah. And like the question, if we want to get objective about it, the question that should be asked is, if we're part of nature and therefore we're a vector of spreading seed, like different than a bird, what is taking up more native habitat? The corn, wheat, and soy, which is not technically native to North America, or at least like our part of North America.
Right. And these versions of corn, wheat, and soy. So.
Yeah, exactly. Or this invasive weed that might be spreading in a little area. It's corn, wheat, and soy. It takes up way more acreage and it's causing way more destruction than a couple of invasive weeds. And so I'm constantly faced with things like this, because the other thing that happens is like the beavers, if it's native and we don't like it, we call it vermin. And so
we go with our negative metaphor about nature and that we need to shift, we need to change. I'm with you, go for it.
And so nature doesn't have sentiment. She's indifferent. Like coming back, bringing this full circle back to the three sisters, we need to think about Earth as terrestrial and aquatic surfaces as just solar collectors. And in the way that the Maya were able to harvest 83% of the sun in a very small amount of space, modern man has basically optimized not for solar gain, but for mechanization. And this is no more apparent if you kind of coming back to my oil and gas roots. Every calorie of food we consume right now takes 30 calories of hydrocarbon to get to our plate. Now, if we were to go back to the Maya example, if they were putting in 30 calories of energy for every calorie they got, they would starve to death.
Absolutely, yeah.
So when I look at the life systems that either I am encouraging or that emerge on their own, I just have this great sense of humility about trying to come at it from a childlike approach. Like, what are you here to teach me? If I actually have an open enough mind to listen to what you're saying, even though we don't speak the same language. And by the way, I'll just say I'm biased. I do believe that plants are sentient, no different than my chickens and my dogs and all those other things. We just haven't figured out what frequency to communicate on. And so I just have to remain curious and hopefully figure out what speaks their language.
I'm with you. We don't know what the aliens are going to speak. We don't know. We just don't speak their language. It doesn't mean that they're not speaking, that they're not communicating. Yeah. I love the focus on the solar energy. And if you think about, the 30 calories to 1 calorie gained and the the lack of appreciation for water and for sun and for the impact that sun has on every different solar energy has on every aspect of our natural world. Like it changes everything if you think about harvesting that energy. Like it's a completely different mindset that I had never thought about. So, wow. Like, and the shortcut of saying we need to put up solar panels to gather solar energy so that we can then use it for less efficient, less effective uses again. Like, we're missing the whole point. Like solar energy and the earth was created to best process it. And we're not taking advantage of that. Wow, the opportunity is unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. McKenna, I can't remember his first name right now, but he has this quote where he says, like, imagine I give you a design problem that you have to design something that self-replicates, it grows on its own, doesn't require labor, takes CO2, turns it into biomass, creates habitat, seeds the clouds, and then to turn around and turn it into paper, and so like the epitome of this is putting up solar collectors and then using the electricity to feed a machine that liquefies CO2 and pumps it underground. It's like, we don't, and then like the inversion of this is that the tree that grows all on its own has no value until I kill it. And it's not that we shouldn't cut down trees. Like, they're a valuable bioresource that we should steward and like we can be appreciative that we're able to turn it into lumber and live in houses and all of that sort of stuff. I am pragmatic. At the end of the day, I'm a humanist, but I recognize that to be a human that has a place on this earth and that my offspring will have a place requires me to act in specific ways. I think a lot of what technology tries to do is it tries to steal ideas from an open source collection of ideas called nature, and then it patents it and somehow calls it unique, and then it allows us to raise GDP. And so I think we've got our incentives all wrong.
Our measurement systems, our incentives and our measurement systems, right?
Yeah, and nowhere clearer. And I think we're about to head into a massive, sorry to be negative, but massive economic collapse here in the next, who knows when. Like, I think it's a very frothy stock exchange. And even I just read the other day that only 0.2% of the GDP in the US is related to non-AI related activities. So,
oh my God, we're down to that. Oh.
It's pretty dire.
I mean, the amount of incredibly important new thinking that you just offered us is just blowing my mind. I have to say, like, I'm going to listen to this recording over and over again and just thrive in it. So thank you. I don't know how to even ask you to like wrap it up with some sort of, how do you wrap it? Because you've got so much more in your head that you could offer. And I can't wait to keep conversations going with you and keep learning from you. But what do you have, like, now that you've thought about this for an hour of our conversation, what's coming to mind that to wrap up and give us, me and listeners, like, what do we do now? Like, what's our call to action? What should we be thinking about? What should we be thinking about differently? Whatever comes to mind for you.
Well, we all have this allotment of hours on this earth. And I think my publisher just wrote me the other day. I have 2 books that I've published and offered to sell me all of the books that were in storage for $2 a book because the world's just not reading anymore. He actually did the research recently that they look at the number of hours the average person sleeps, works, eats, and then like entertains himself on phones and Netflix and things, and actually adds up to more than 24 hours, which means that people are probably watching Netflix at work or while they sleep or something.
Absolutely.
Like that.
Yeah.
And we all have an opportunity to be really deliberate about how we spend those hours of life energy. And if we don't get deliberate, if we don't set our goals on something, and in fact, my most recent LinkedIn post was about goal setting. We have this process that we use called...
I wanted to ask you about that. Go ahead. Talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like setting your vision and values. And so we use something called the 8 forms of capital, which is a more holistic balance sheet. And you write your vision out as though it's true today, even if it isn't, with regards to how that form of capital is going to exist on your holistic balance sheet. We get way too concerned about financial capital and material capital, but there's the community capital, there's living capital, which is like the ecosystems you steward in your own life as well. Like you're a living entity. There's intellectual capital, experiential capital. And so each of those statements should have, and we could do an episode on this even, but they have a statement that describes how you want that capital to look. So we live close and connected to nature. We live meaningful lives and, like things that are very aspirational. And then the way you get that the way that the woo-woo world will say you manifest it, but manifesting is just like you make one decision a day, or multiple decisions a day, and you just make sure that the decisions that you're making are towards the ends or that vision statement that you want. And so where I'm going with that is that we all have the ability to create meaningful change in this world. And it's understanding that the sphere of influence that you have actually is a butterfly effect. I used to teach this in our permaculture design course, that there's some really interesting. Have you ever heard of the Dutch cohort study?
I don't know. You've got all this good stuff that I got to dig into. Go ahead. Tell us about it.
Well, they couldn't figure out why everybody in Holland within a 3-month period of time, and I think they were in their 50s, all were getting diabetes. It was so statistically significant, they had to dig into it. And so it turns out that after World War II, there was a 6-month famine, and I can't remember which trimester it was in, but all the babies that were, I'm just going to make it up, all the babies that were in the second trimester ended up getting diabetes because during that trimester, their mothers were calorically deficient. And so the body was basically sensing the calories coming in and saying, oh my gosh, I'm going into a world that has no calories. I need to change the way my pancreas and liver are formed. And then they came out, and I'm Dutch heritage. The Dutch eat the craziest amount of calories.
My daughter lived in the Netherlands for 8 months. They do not have a very healthy diet.
And so all of a sudden, this body had adapted in the mother's womb to basically go into a calorically deficient world. And that wasn't what they ended up with. And so they all ended up with metabolic syndrome. My point in that story is that small changes in how we interact with the world have cascading implications around us. And you don't know which of the things that you're going to take on, whether it's joining your local community group, cleaning up a river, planting a tree or 100 trees. Most of the things that we interface with on this planet, we will never understand the implications that we create. And so really understanding where that boundary layer exists between your sphere of influence and your sphere of concern is super important. Be aware of the hazards, but focus in on the things that you have agency over. And assuming that you're kind of aligned with living a regenerative life, make it taste better, make it more fun, because bees are attracted to honey and not to vinegar. And it's important to be aware of the things that are scary. But if we collectively all do tiny little things, little tiny actions, it adds up to a lot. And whether there's a grand conspiracy to kind of push us down or not, who knows? But I do believe that we largely feel disempowered at the scale of these problems, and it shuts us down, and it forces us to get onto our phone to deal with, to get stress relief, that cortisol drop by flipping through 60-second shorts, as opposed to learning to bake bread or going out and building a garden and actually living in the real world. And I think that what is very seductive right now is fully embodying this digital existence that we're all being sucked into by being on computers all day long and not actually tasting the world and hugging people and smelling the nature and actually just having appreciation and humility for the allotment of hours that we were given on this planet.
Oh my God, this is just so beautiful. I'm all about ripple effects, and every single bit of energy that you put out, whether it's positive or negative, is going to ripple and it has an effect. You do not know what it is. You will never know the impact you have on others. But if you start with intentionality and a sense of agency and humility and appreciation, everything changes. So thank you so much for wrapping us up. Rob, I cannot wait to stay in connected with you and in your life and in your world of curiosity and just beauty. So, oh goodness, thank you so much. Much appreciative. Thank you for being here at Resilience Gone Wild. Rob reminded me that energy moves through everything, through people, systems, soil, and sunlight. His canoe on the river isn't really about steering. It's about attention. Where we place our focus is what we energize. When we stare at the rocks, the fears, the what-ifs, the obstacles, our energy drifts there. When we look toward the current, the path ahead towards purpose, passion, and joy, we stay in flow. Gratitude often turns our eyes to the rocks, to what calmed or steadied us when we felt unsteady. It's a vital practice that settles the body and soothes the mind. Appreciation, though, looks to the current. It's forward-moving. It directs energy outward, toward what deserves to be seen, strengthened, and celebrated. Appreciation mirrors Rob's own shift away from the world of energy extraction to a focus on regeneration. It's what happens when we stop seeking and storing energy for ourselves and start letting it flow outward, strengthening the web of connection around us. Rob spoke of our spheres of influence and concern, how real change begins when we tend what's within reach instead of spending our strength on what we can't control. Appreciation follows that same design. It feeds what we can grow right here, the soil under our feet, the people beside us, the communities we nurture. And the ripples travel. Rob's story of the Dutch children conceived during famine shows how a single season of nourishment or neglect can echo for generations. Appreciation carries that same quiet power. What we notice and name in others can ripple through their lives and far beyond our own. Appreciation also brings us back to what's real. In a world that scrolls more than it strolls, we lose texture. Rob's reminder is simple. Taste, smell, hug, live in the real world. Appreciation begins in the senses. It brings us back to our bodies and our feelings, shifting us toward compassionate action. And beneath it all is humility, the kind that awakens in moments of awe. It's what we feel when we truly see another person's generosity, compassion, or brilliance, when a landscape or animal behavior stops us in our tracks, when the intricacy of the systems and ecosystems around us remind us that we're part of something vast and alive. Humility isn't smallness. It's spaciousness. It's widening that lets appreciation move freely. It keeps energy flowing outward, not trapped inside our egos or fears, so that awe, respect, and gratitude can all circulate through the living systems that connect us. And that brings us back to the three sisters, the original regenerative design. As Rob reminded us, indigenous wisdom like this carried 7-generation thinking long before it had a name. Corn, beans, and squash didn't just share space. They formed a living system that captured nearly all the sunlight that touched it, feeding the soil while feeding the people. Today we might call that quorum sensing, where diversity makes the whole stronger than the sum of its parts. It's a lesson in enlightened self-interest, giving what we can, receiving what we need, and letting energy circulate so life keeps renewing itself. Appreciation for the earth means acting on that love in everyday ways. We can buy locally and seasonally, visiting farmers markets, joining a CSA, and supporting growers who care for the soil and the pollinators that sustain us. We can choose organic when possible, plant native flowers or a small garden, and compost what's left to return nourishment to the ground. We can reduce waste, repair instead of replace, and support the local conservation, land trust, and permaculture organizations that help ecosystems thrive. We can also learn from and support indigenous communities and educators whose deep ecological knowledge continues to guide regenerative practices around the world. People who have long understood that giving back is inseparable from receiving. You can find this wisdom through workshops, online learning communities, or local partnerships that invite shared stewardship and respect. Rob's own organization, Fifth World, helps people design land, water, and energy systems that give more than they take, a model for how regeneration can become a way of life. Every act of care, whether tending to your garden, buying from local farmers, or joining a community effort to restore land or water, becomes a way of saying thank you. It's appreciation in motion, a pulse of energy that helps life keep renewing itself. And if you'd like to build your own appreciation muscle, here are a few gentle ways to keep the current flowing. Speak appreciation aloud with specifics. Name what's beautiful or skillful in someone's action. It's awesome how you kept calm when things got tense. It calmed everyone. Or, your curiosity opened a whole new world for us. If you can't say it in person, send a short voice note or message. Let your tone carry the warmth. Notice and record it. Keep a small notebook or phone note. Moments when someone lifted the energy in a room or made life brighter. Those stories become reserves of resilience you can draw on when times are hard. Slow down. Look for something unexpected, even in the ordinary, and acknowledge the person or process that made it possible. And finally, resensitize yourself. Step outside for 2 minutes. Feel the air. Listen. Breathe. Touch the ground. Let awe reopen the channel for appreciation. Thanksgiving, the giving of thanks, was never meant to stop at words. It's an invitation to send energy outward, to notice and honor the gifts that sustain us, and to add our own. When appreciation flows, everyone in the circle grows stronger. If this episode resonated, share it with someone who could use a shift from gratitude to appreciation. Someone who might love the story of the three sisters, or who's ready to rediscover the joy of giving back. All of us at Resilience Gone Wild appreciate every listener who follows, rates, reviews, and spreads the word. It's a beautiful way to keep the energy moving. Until next time, stay appreciative, stay connected, stay wild. Happy Thanksgiving.